The girl turned to Hang, asking what they would be doing today. Next to her stood a cute girl with cat ears, who, without hiding her impatience, loudly expressed her desire to see the main character at work as soon as possible. In response, Hang placed his hammer on the table and announced that it was time to get down to business. Meanwhile, while a storm raged over the kingdom of Vale, in the throne room, one of the confidants, seized with horror, reported to his king that the summoned hero turned out to be completely unsuitable. King Blade III confirmed with deep sadness that this was indeed a hero from another world, although none of those present could comprehend the true meaning of these words. Then the king rose from his throne and addressed the chief magician, who immediately fell down. The hero, looking at his hands, seemed unable to believe what was happening. He explained that no matter how much he tried, the result remained the same. He could not detect any unique abilities in the hero. The confidant, not understanding what skills were being discussed, received an explanation. Heroic growth, universal language, and adaptation to the environment were standard abilities that were always given to new arrivals. The other mages, clad in heavy cloaks, were confused, for the summoning had certainly succeeded, but something like this had never happened before. The king, trembling with anger, commanded the chopping. The mage asked him again what exactly he had meant. The confidant also could not understand the meaning of what was said. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, a chilling order was heard. Cut off the head of the main character. The hero froze, seized with horror, unable to understand the meaning of what he heard, and he bowed his head obediently. The magician, trying to protect the young man, turned to his majesty, begging him to calm down. The king, jumping up from his throne, continued to scream frantically that it was impossible to remain calm in such a situation. He threw up his hands in despair, exclaiming that they would have to wait 15 years before they could summon the next hero. The hero continued to kneel before him. The king, covering his face with his hands, asked bitterly why this had happened, and why the summoned one had been so useless. He furiously blamed the magicians, declaring that it was their fault and that they had made a terrible mistake. There was genuine horror in his eyes as he warned them that they were next in line, adding that this was exactly what they deserved and that they should not think themselves indispensable, and then swore to destroy all of magic. The men in cloaks cried out in response, begging His Majesty for mercy, but the king sharply ordered everyone to be silent and not to approach him. At this point, the protagonist, with his hand on his heart, turned to the king, asking him to wait and claiming that he could still be useful. However, the king, convinced of his uselessness, only thought that he was of no use. He declared that he was fed up with empty words and ordered the guards to throw him out. Suddenly, one of the guards entered the room and, turning to His Majesty, said that he had a brilliant idea, because, after all, the people always need heroes. The hero's summoning was declared successful, and the people were informed of the event. The protagonist remained under house arrest in the palace, and was allowed to leave only to participate in ceremonies where he had to play the hero. He was also believed to have fought on the battlefield. To maintain this illusion, shadow troops were sent out and false reports were made of his exploits. This is how he lived for the next 15 years, earning the nickname Decorative Hero. The Forge was discussing the summoning of a hero. The head blacksmith noted that it was time to bid farewell to Hang. Hang thanked everyone, noting that he had learned a lot. The head blacksmith reminded him of how at first he could not forge even a nail. He replied that things were different now. The other boy added that, without help, they would have a very hard time. Hang swung his hammer and hit the anvil with all his might, muttering that there was nothing he could do now and his time here was up. Hang brought his hammer down hard on the anvil, bitterly aware that his role here was mere decoration. Over the past 15 years, the Royal Forge had become his second home. It was a harsh, dirty, dangerous place that required hard labor, but even so, Hang found it less grueling than his previous life in Japan. The master blacksmith who took him in 15 years ago, when Hang was completely lost and alone, taught him countless useful things. He expressed his deep gratitude to him and the entire team for their kindness and guidance. The men in response only looked at Hang with sadness, realizing that their journey together was coming to an end. Many years have passed since the hero was summoned to this world. Although his path was full of difficulties, he found loyal comrades and true friends. Hang's life turned out to be much richer and more meaningful than he could have ever imagined. Finally, The day came to summon a new hero. A magical portal opened right in front of the king's throne, emitting a blinding light. The king was amazed by its power. The courtiers whispered that the summoning had been successful and that a real, worthy hero would soon appear before them. A girl with long hair appeared from the glow. Hang, addressing her, introduced the place as the Kingdom of Vale and asked her name. The girl, slightly embarrassed, identified herself as Endo Kanai. He introduced himself to her as Hang, the former hero. The girl seemed to be confused about the meaning of the word hero, but the king lost no time in loudly ordering the chief mage to test her abilities immediately. The crowd rejoiced, joyfully exclaiming about the magnificent result and the presence of a unique, very useful skill in the new heroine. The mages quickly took Endo Kanai away, telling her that it was time to prepare for the ceremony and present her to the people. The girl was surprised by this turn of events. The court guard reported to the king that the country was now safe, and he confirmed it. The king clenched his fist and announced that the former hero would be rewarded with a fiefdom. He explained that it was a deserted but quiet land, with picturesque mountains and forests, where Hang could recuperate after 15 years of battles. Hang lowered his head. He knew very well that he had never left the capital, and these words about fighting sounded like nonsense to him. Nevertheless, he knelt before the king in his throne, expressing gratitude for the favor. It was time to bid farewell to his comrades. A carriage was waiting for him at the gate. Hang climbed onto it, turned to the men and thanked them again for everything. Then he left the kingdom. The crowd waved their hands and shouted, inviting them to come and visit. The man rode in a carriage pulled by 2 horses. He was 40 years old. His thoughts often returned to Japan, and he wondered what it was like there now. Lately, Hang had noticed that he was becoming sentimental because of his age. He was sure that 15 years spent in the capital had changed him, Sasanuki. Hang, irrevocably. After 20 days of travel, he was informed that they had arrived. The man got out of the carriage, complaining of severe back pain. The man who was seeing him off advised him to climb a nearby hill, from where he could see the area. Hang thanked him. The man quickly adjusted his hat and drove away. Hang climbed the hill. From there, vast expanses opened up before him. He was amazed and did not know what to say. The entire dark forest, stretching to the horizon and surrounded by high mountains, was now his domain. Hangy turned to call out to the driver to confirm if this was really the place, but he was already out of sight. The man sighed, admitting that it was to be expected. He turned back to the forest, knowing that there was no point in standing here any longer. Hang went deeper into the forest, wondering if there was a village. He didn't know where to go. Suddenly his gaze caught on something. Hidden among the ancient trees was an abandoned hut, almost completely covered in moss. The man cautiously stepped inside and looked around. It was obvious that the dwelling had not seen its owner for a long time. Grass was growing everywhere and the air was dry. Nevertheless, Hang decided that this place would be quite suitable for an overnight stay. A slight smile appeared on his face. Stepping out into the fresh air, he noticed an old barn in a small hollow. The man walked towards it and looked inside. The same devastation reigned inside. Cobwebs hung everywhere, and the walls were covered with moss. Suddenly, a faint glow coming from the fireplace caught his attention. Hang crossed his arms, wondering if the king had really taken care of him in such a way. Perhaps His Majesty wasn't such a bad man after all. Once outside, he realized the next problem. There was no river nearby, not even signs of wells. He looked around carefully. The situation was crystal clear. Hang extended his hand, preparing to use magic. He activated the water search spell. Several sparkling drops burst from his palm. The magical moisture, obeying his will, rushed straight into the old barrel. The hero smiled contentedly, glad that his magical abilities remained with him. Now all that was left was to take care of food. He walked under the bright sun. Hang walked deeper into the dense forest. He held his trusty knife in his hand. However, no matter how far he walked, there were no edible plants. Even if he decided to cultivate the land, it would take a long time for a harvest. The presence of a river would allow him to catch fish. Suddenly, his gaze caught something amazing ahead. Hang came out into a spacious clearing, strewn with bright, fragrant flowers. He looked around, wondering that such a beautiful place could be hidden in this forest. However, something else immediately caught his attention. In the center of the clearing lay a huge, brightly glowing lump. Hang, intrigued, wondered if it was gold. As he approached, he was surprised to discover that the block was even more massive than it had seemed from afar. The man tapped on the surface, noting that it did not feel like ordinary metal at all. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet began to shake. Hang stepped back, his face filled with astonishment. He couldn't understand the strange sound that was heard around him. Then came the deafening flapping of giant wings. The hero's eyes widened in shock and genuine horror. Directly in front of him, towering over the field, stood a huge winged dragon. Its appearance was stern and full of anger. Hang fell limply to the ground at its paws. Raising his head, he realized that before him was a real dragon. The dragon leaned down, sniffing the man, and noticed that he had a strange smell. He asked who he was. The man introduced himself as Hang, a former summoned hero. The dragon seemed confused about what this meant or who he was. He explained that this was the Forest of Druid, a sacred place where gods, beasts, and spirits lived. Hang repeated the name in surprise. The thought flashed through his mind that the dragon must be one of the main inhabitants of this place. A light wind carried petals across the clearing. Right in front of the man stood Cruel, the sacred dragon. His appearance was stern and fierce. His huge mouth was strewn with sharp fangs. The dragon looked at Hang with his black eyes and told him to leave, explaining that this place was not meant for him. However, the man replied that he did not understand what the dragon was talking about. The next moment, the dragon collapsed to the ground, exhausted. There was a deafening roar. The hero rushed to Cruel, asking what had happened to him. He noticed a terrible wound. Blood was oozing through the thick scales and skin. It was obvious that such a wound could not be stitched with an ordinary needle. The man asked the dragon if his scales felt pain. Cruel explained that the scales served as the dragon's armor and were completely insensitive to pain or itching. Clenching his fist, the hero addressed the powerful creature. He asked the dragon to wait a little, promising to create the necessary tools. His face expressed deep concentration. The dragon remained lying, looking questioningly at the man. Meanwhile, Hang returned to his hut. He brought everything he needed from the shed, setting up a workstation by the fireplace. The work began. He began to blow on the fire, noticing that the bellows were working properly. The stove was heated to the required temperature. The master finally realized that the moment had come when it was time to begin his painstaking work. Dressed in protective clothing designed for work in a forge, he decisively swung his massive forge hammer. The powerful first blow with a loud metallic ringing landed right on the red-hot piece of iron, and the work in the workshop finally began to boil energetically with renewed vigor. Having securely fixed the red-hot metal on a special machine, the blacksmith, with a concentrated expression on his face, began methodically forging the parts necessary for his project. A huge fireplace served him as a powerful source of heat. Right next to the anvil, ready for use, stood a large wooden container filled with cool water, and the entire spacious barn was completely filled with the characteristic sounds of diligent and painstaking blacksmith work. After some time of intense work, the first fully finished metal part was already lying on the surface of the anvil in front of him. The hero noted with satisfaction that one of the necessary parts was ready, but 8 or 10 more were needed. At that very moment, the ancient dragon, who had been deep in sleep until now, slowly opened his huge amber eyes, only vaguely discerning the world. A voice called him to wake up from his sleep, disturbing his peace. Hang turned to Cruel, expressing his joy. He said that the dragon had come to its senses. The dragon was surprised, noting that he could see a human again. He felt his wound and looked to his side. He asked what it was. The man explained that it was staples. He added that such devices were used in both medicine and construction. The dragon's body was carefully connected, and the bleeding stopped. Cruel asked if the healer could work with steel. The man replied that it was the only thing he could do. He noted that the blood volume now needed to be restored. Spinach, rich in iron, would be helpful. The healer handed over the lunch. The dragon only sniffed the contents. Hang asked the dragon if he liked the food. He ate it all with surprising speed. The dragon noted that the food was tasty and healthy. The healer assured the dragon that if he asked, he would prepare as much food as he wanted. The dragon's black eyes softened. He tried to say something to the man, but he couldn't. The man only laughed in response and asked the dragon to rest after the meal. For the first time in a long time, he spent the night at the side of a mighty dragon. Together they slept under the endless starry sky. Morning came, and the clearing greeted them with a multitude of blossoming flowers. Their petals were strewn with diamonds of dew. Hang was asked to get up. He yawned, noticing that he had slept very soundly. He was finally awake. A joyful cry of relief rang out. A female voice asked if he was tired of nursing. Turning around, the hero asked not to be called just a man, introducing himself as Hang. Sosanuki. Right in front of him stood a girl with small horns. Her hands were covered in something resembling skin, and she had a tail. She addressed him. Her big, wide eyes looked at him with a smile. She was watching him. She was clearly interested. The girl exclaimed that he was magnificent. She added that she could not believe how he managed to heal her wound with iron. The man was taken aback, not knowing what to answer. Sweat appeared on his forehead. He asked if the girl in front of him was cruel. The girl lifted her shirt, confirming that it was her. She explained that she even had a scar on her stomach and showed it. Heng saw that the scar had indeed become much smaller, although it had not disappeared completely. He asked the girl to lower her shirt, assuring her that he had already seen everything. The man was clearly embarrassed. The traveler noted that, in any case, he was glad that she was feeling better. The girl thanked him and asked him to listen. The man wondered what she was going to tell him. The girl bowed before the hero. She needed a favor. The traveler could not understand what this girl was getting at. Then, with a radiant smile, she declared her passionate desire to conquer iron, too. With a pleading voice, she asked to be accepted as a student. Such a statement stunned Hang. He only looked questioningly at the girl, trying to comprehend what he had heard. This meeting that had taken place here, with the sacred dragon in the mysterious druid forest, on the very edge of the kingdom, was undoubtedly fateful. The king finished his meal, eating every last crumb. The cutlery clinked, and he wondered what would happen next. His attention was drawn to Kana. She was really good. The assistant poured him wine and remarked that, compared to that non-entity, she looked magnificent. He soon realized that he himself had become only a pitiful decoration in this royal spectacle. The hero had lived in the palace for 15 years and now found himself on the street. The minister wondered if the animals in the forest were eating him now. The king just laughed, noticing that he was very angry. He, turning to his majesty, answered with a smile that this was not so. Both laughed. Suddenly, the door to the dining room swung open. A wounded soldier ran into the room and loudly informed the king of the losses. The man collapsed on the floor, exhausted. Both the king and the prime minister looked at him in bewilderment. The king came closer and asked how this had happened to his invincible knights. The soldier, breathing heavily, noted that this was unthinkable. Their weapons were ineffective and their armor was as weak as paper. The prime minister asked about the reasons for such a defeat. Meanwhile, in the forest, Cruel explored the surroundings and was happy. She asked the man if this was a house. He explained that it was more of a forge. The girl looked around and noted that there were many interesting things here. The man looked at her and remarked that the queen was still young and that they should be a little more modest. She just grinned and replied that it was not quite so. He did not understand her hint and asked about her age. The girl closed her eyes with a smug smile and said that she would be 170 years old this year, but she was still one of the youngest dragons in the world. The man was shocked by this news and could not find an answer. The master asked her a serious question regarding her noticeable wound, to which Cruel responded by explaining that she was attacked by ferocious demons whose main goal was to hunt the rare divine beasts that inhabited the ancient lands of Druid. The man remarked that such a situation seemed extremely alarming. In response, the girl only admitted that at that moment she had let down her guard, emphasizing that under normal circumstances, her power made her invincible. Then, closing the distance between them, she resolutely came even closer and, with hope in her voice, asked him directly if he was ready to accept her as his devoted disciple. Hang, looking down at her a little, expressed his concern about the proposal. The girl reassured him by explaining that if she could master the art of ironworking, she would boast of this skill to her fellows. The master closed his eyes for a moment and, taking a deep breath, admitted that he was glad of her interest in blacksmithing, but that he still felt very uneasy. Cruel looked at him questioningly, completely unsure of how to respond. Then Hang, with a warm smile, finally suggested that they get to work immediately in the spacious forge. In response, she hugged him tightly and expressed her deep gratitude from the bottom of her heart. Soon, both of them, having changed their usual clothes for work clothes, began to work actively. Cruel impatiently asked what exactly they were going to create, and whether it would be some kind of weapon. Hang, thinking, asked her to give him some time. He remembered his old work with weapons and decided to try making knives. The girl asked what she needed to do. The protagonist explained that she should observe and learn. This is extremely important for the process. She noted that she understood everything. The work in the forge was in full swing, and the girl watched the master at work. The blacksmith raised his hammer, forging a weapon, and the air was filled with the ringing of metal. The girl did not take her eyes off the molten steel, and what she saw deeply shocked her. Sighing, the protagonist continued and soon completed his work. Turning around, he noticed a frustrated Cruel, who was shaking as she looked at the knife she had just made. He apologized to her, explaining that he had gotten too deep into the process. Cruel beamed and smiled, saying there was no need to apologize, as it was so much fun watching him work. She added that she was amazed at his speed and beamed with happiness. The hero explained that this was not the final knife yet. It would have to be fired. The product would be sprinkled with grain and heated. The girl asked if everything would be ready after that. The blacksmith replied that no, because the metal was not sticky enough. Cruel did not understand the meaning of the word. The man explained that it was the ability of the metal to retain its structure. Hearing this, the girl laughed, finding the explanation very interesting. She asked what they were doing now and if they were using oil. Hang explained that gradually heating the metal would make it sticky, and then all that was left was to sharpen it. He held the blank out. The girl was amazed at the work they had done. The man announced that the knife was ready, holding up the finished kitchen tool. The blade even seemed to glow. Cruel exclaimed that it was amazing. The man said that he planned to make 5 more of these items by the end of the day, and that Cruel would be able to help him. This news brought a radiant smile to the girl's face. The blacksmith added that they would make more of them and sell them in the nearest town. The hero settled down at the city market, among the many stalls by the fountain, laying out several knives in front of them. The blacksmith threw back his head, admitting that he had not expected such a meager demand. The main buyers at the market were young women and couples. Jewelry and toys sold well, but tools did not seem to be in great demand. Cruel turned to Hang, suggesting that since they were in the city, why not try selling swords to mercenaries? The protagonist considered the prospect of making swords. Suddenly, they heard a cry begging them to stop. A girl begged to be let go. She was led away by bandits who roughly ordered her to be silent. They dropped the captive on the ground, and she sobbed and screamed loudly. The girl excitedly explained that the sword she had displayed was a valuable commodity, and if they were not going to buy it, they should move away. The group looked at her with disdain, and one of them threw it on the ground, asking why she even called it a sword. One of the soldiers stepped on the sword, wondering in confusion what it was. He began to take his own sword out of its sheath, holding it by the hilt. The soldier declared that he would now show the girl a real masterpiece. He pulled out a sword made at the royal court. The soldier began to boast about his weapon, claiming that the sword was light and durable. According to him, it could even cut through a demon and was no match for a fake. His comrades supported him, agreeing that it looked impressive. The soldier was still standing on the sword. Cruel, who had been watching every movement of the smug soldier, expressed her distaste for such arrogant individuals to Hang with noticeable disgust and resolutely suggested that they immediately give them a worthy rebuff. In response to her words, the blacksmith slowly rose from his seat, tenderly stroked the girl on the top of her head, and then, carefully casting a penetrating glance at everything happening around, in a calm but firm tone, ordered her to wait patiently in the same place. Noticing the man, the soldiers asked him what he wanted. The hero remarked that he had heard of the soldier's pride in his sword, but stepping on him was too much. The soldier raised his weapon, ordering them to be silent. He shouted that no one dared to tell him what to do. Cruel, who had been watching this dramatic scene unfold tensely from the sidelines, was seriously frightened, feeling a sudden surge of anxiety for the blacksmith's safety. She was overcome with a state of complete and utter shock at what was happening. Suddenly, with incredible speed, there was a sharp whistling swing of the weapon, and at the same moment a multitude of bright white sparks flashed blindingly in the surrounding air. With a deafening, piercing, ringing sound that echoed throughout the area, a large piece of the sword flew off with force and fell heavily onto the hard, dusty ground. The soldier looked at his sword in shock, exclaiming that it was broken. The protagonist, remaining absolutely calm, continued to stand in place, casually holding his sharp knife in one hand, and watched the entire scene with close attention. The group of soldiers cursed and retreated quickly. The man watched them go. A cheering crowd immediately ran up to the main character. Everyone was vying with each other to exclaim that it was amazing. People were puzzled by what trick he used against that sword. Cruel happily hugged him from the side. Hang explained that there was no trick. He added that what he was holding in his hand was not a sword at all. Suddenly, someone called out to him from the side, and the man turned around. The injured girl came up to him, with tears in her eyes, grabbed his hands and warmly thanked the sword master. The man showed the knife, clarifying that he was not a swordsman, but only a blacksmith. The girl asked fearfully to give her a minute. She immediately used recognition magic. The result shocked her. The girl's face suddenly darkened, and she put her hand to her mouth. She asked in a trembling voice what kind of knife it was. The girl noted that it was an S-rank item, although she thought it was an ordinary knife. The characteristics appeared in her mind. Manufacturer, Heiji, S-rank. Item rank is a classification of value, rarity, and ability according to the criteria of the royal court. SS is the class of ancient relics, such as sacred weapons and tools. The protagonist looked at his knife, not believing that it was S rank. The girl grabbed the knife and begged him to sell it to her, shouting that she was ready to give 16 or even 20 gold coins for it. The man had no idea what they were talking about. Cruel, taking advantage of the moment, took out the rest of the knives and said that they had others. The customer asked if these were the same knives. She confirmed that all the knives were also S-rank. The blacksmith himself stood behind, unable to believe what was happening. The girl handed over a bag of money and beamingly announced that she was buying all 5 knives. They were immediately wrapped up for her. The market price of 1 gold coin in this world was about 10,000 yen. Thus, in the first day, the protagonist earned a whole million. The city's streets were buzzing with life, filled with noise and bustle. The heroes found shelter in a cafe, where they continued to discuss recent events. The girl introduced herself as Filner Raza, a merchant, and expressed her joy at meeting the protagonist. The man, holding a cup in his hands, reciprocated her feelings. The heroes walked along the bright streets of the city, discussing and rejoicing at the deal. He then turned to Miss Filner, asking if she was really sure she was willing to spend 100 gold pieces, considering her old, patched coat. The girl lowered her head and asked if it was possible to pay for the purchase in installments. She apologized, explaining that when she saw something truly valuable, she often lost control. Filner acknowledged that this could create problems for her as a trader, but she assured them that she would be honest and trustworthy. Her concerns were obvious. Then Hang, while Cruel was asleep on the table, asked if he could propose one condition, since everything was going well on the whole. Miss Filner, without hesitation, agreed to the condition. The hero, shaking his finger, explained that they would make a contract. He would not sell his knives to other merchants, wanting to be sure that only she would do this. The girl jumped up from her chair, expressing her surprise at this news. She clarified whether she understood correctly that she would receive exclusive rights to sell these S-rank knives. The girl asked if Hang really wanted this, as it was a very generous offer. The protagonist replied that he had always had a weakness for communication. He gently stroked the sleeping Cruel's head and added that since they were working together, he did not want to spread himself too thin. It was important to him that Raza would take care of all the necessary formalities and details. The girl, putting her hand to her chest, assured him that this would not be a problem. The man handed her a small map, indicating that the knives would need to be picked up at the marked location. The girl, taking the paper, was surprised to discover that he lived in the forest of Druid. This news stunned her. The hero noted that he had his own reasons. At that moment, Cruel woke up, waved her hand, and told Filner that if she got lost, she only had to shout and she would take her. Raza asked if Cruel was a beast man. She yawned and replied that she was a sacred dragon. These words astounded Raza. She did not know what to say. Covering her mouth with her hand, she muttered that such a thing could not be. The protagonist only laughed, suggesting that she simply take her word for it. Evening descended on the city, and warm light streamed from the old hut in the forest. Inside, dinner was waiting for them. The table was groaning with many delicious dishes. Cruel joyfully exclaimed that it was a real feast. Hang suggested that they all eat well, since they now had money for food. Their table was indeed full of food. The girl, enjoying the pizza, noted that it was very tasty, and that the main character was an excellent cook. She ate her fill and her belly was noticeably rounded. The girl was completely happy. She said that now she had to contribute to the dinner. The man asked what she was going to bring. Cruel waved her hands, indicating that she wanted to bring a huge pig. Cruel took the bow, saying that she wanted to borrow it. Soon she set off. The man only watched her go, wondering why she needed this item. After some time, a huge dragon crashed down nearby with a roar. The protagonist ran up to Cruel, asking why she had taken on her true form again. The dragon was visibly shaking, sighing heavily. The girl regained her human form and began to cry. She turned to Hang, telling him that the bow was broken. It was split in half. The man noticed this. He gently stroked her head, calming her down and asking her not to cry. Cruel explained that she had found a boar, pulled with all her might, but the bow couldn't withstand it. The hero noticed that a regular bow simply couldn't cope with her incredible strength. Cruel insistently extended her thin finger straight forward. At that moment, the full image of what had happened came together. At the moment when the boar disappeared from sight, Cruel transformed into a dragon, and in panic it hid from her in the cave. With a soft, comforting gesture, Hang gently placed his hand on the top of the girl's head again, gently stroking her hair and quietly but firmly asking her to trust him completely and rely entirely on his abilities. He promised her that he would certainly create for her not just a bow, but an ideal weapon that would suit her, taking into account all her unique features. Hearing this, Cruel instantly transformed. Her face lit up with an extraordinary radiance. With the first rays of the rising sun, announcing the arrival of a new day, the old forge of Hang immediately began to seethe with active and lively work, filling the air with the ringing of metal and the smell of hot coals. The man stood motionless in the middle of his workshop, looking around carefully, considering which stage he should begin this complex and responsible process of creating the perfect weapon. Hang quickly figured that if absolute strength were the only criterion, then ordinary iron would be quite suitable for this purpose. However, this metal would be completely unacceptably heavy for the product he had in mind. He knew very well that the heavier the bow, the more it would affect its overall accuracy, making it less effective. So he was faced with a task. He needed to find a completely different, more suitable metal. The protagonist began to carefully examine all his existing stocks of metals stored in his forge. When he looked into one of the old boxes, his eyes widened. Inside this box lay pure and shining silver. The protagonist carefully took a hefty handful of this unusual metal in his hand, trying to understand how such a huge amount of rare silver could have ended up in his old forge. Hang came out of the hut and turned to Cruel. She was just drawing patterns on the ground. He asked her to dig a hole. The girl did not immediately understand why this was necessary, but immediately began her transformation into a dragon. Using her giant form, she began digging hard. She did it incredibly fast, and the man asked her to stop. The dragon asked why he needed this hole. He was out of breath. The protagonist explained that they were now using it to create a bow. Hang's impromptu workshop. The first step was to prepare the hole. This required a long, narrow hole. That's what Cruel dug, even if it was a little larger than needed. The second and no less important stage of this process was the careful preparation of the tree. The protagonist, pointing to a specific object, noted that for the current work this time they were planning to use a pre-prepared stick. It had to be carefully and deeply immersed into the main structure to effectively prevent its possible subsequent destruction, and then carefully sprinkled with a special release agent. Then, as a mandatory step, it was necessary to securely and accurately insert the prepared stick into the hole specially designed for it. The third and no less significant point in the sequence of works was the direct creation of the necessary form. Right on the bare ground, a complex and mysterious magic circle gradually began to appear. The girl exclaimed in surprise as the sand instantly hardened. The man explained that now they could pull out the tree, and they had a beautiful shape. The first stage was successfully completed. The fourth stage was smelting. The heroes stood at the improvised furnace. Now they had to pull the mold out of the furnace. The girl said that she understood everything. Cruel held the mold in her hands and asked if she was doing everything right. The protagonist was surprised that she lifted it with her bare hands and with molten metal inside. She calmed him down, saying that there was nothing to worry about and that such heat was nothing to her. The girl understood everything. And now he was going to pour iron into the hole. Hang's mouth opened. He was amazed. He was amazed at how quickly she grasped everything on the fly. The fifth stage was pouring, and now everything had cooled down. They were standing near the ground. It was time to extract the blank. The girl watched what was happening with undisguised delight. She saw that the man was standing in front of her. The girl began to extract the blank. The girl twirled the rod in her hands, noting that it was surprisingly light. She handled it deftly. Hang explained that it was an unusual metal, which in his world was called aluminum. The girl looked at the hero questioningly, not knowing what it was. He replied that the material was light but strong and easy to work with. He added that they would bend it to create the bow's arc, and assured them that they were doing everything correctly. Cruel asked if it could be bent right now. The man just laughed and said that it was a special metal, mixed with many more elements than just light silver. However, before he could finish, the girl with her incredible strength suddenly bent the piece of metal with her bare hands. She bent it, giving it the desired shape. Jubilant, Cruel raised the blank above her head, declaring that everything was ready, and gave him a smile. The hero was amazed by the girl's strength. Hang handed her the bow. It was ready, and now it was time to test it in action. The girl pulled the bowstring, prepared the arrows, and deftly hit the target. But the arrow broke. This deeply upset Cruel, and she visibly slumped, her shoulders drooping. The man merely scratched his head thoughtfully and leisurely informed her that now all the arrowheads would definitely have to be reinforced. Despite the failure, the young girl was incredibly happy and noted with delight that what had happened was actually very cool. Cruel pointed out with relief that her favorite bow itself remained absolutely whole and unharmed. She was simply madly, unimaginably happy and openly jubilant, confidently declaring that this time she would definitely be able to catch that elusive boar. The protagonist thought deeply because, considering their previous failure, he should definitely start worrying. He sincerely wished that this sincere and so infectious joy would never leave her heart. Hang carefully asked Cruel if it would be possible for him to observe her upcoming hunt. The girl quickly turned to him and, with a slight smile, replied that, why not, of course. After some time, they were hunting in a dark forest. They were sitting in the bushes, looking for new prey. The girl saw her opponent. A huge boar was running through the forest. The main character asked if they were going to hunt it, because the beast was huge. The girl answered in the affirmative. Cruel drew her bowstring and prepared to shoot straight at her target. Suddenly, Hang asked Cruel to stop, noting that she was exerting too much effort. Despite all the persuasion, the girl released the arrow straight from the bow. It flew at a rapid speed. The bow did not break. The girl hit the target and killed the boar through and through. Everything was illuminated by a small light, and a light breeze blew. The man began to defend himself from it. The girl only looked at her victory, holding the bow in her hands. She was delighted, because it was amazing and the bow worked. The man in armor noted that he thought it was her doing it. The girl objected, saying that this was not the case at all. She added that the bow the master had created was amazing, and without it, she would not have been able to kill the demonic boar with one shot. The protagonist turned around and noticed that the aluminum bow was also S rank. He He wondered what the hell was going on with his forging skills. Night enveloped the quiet forest where a mossy hut stood, soft light streaming from its windows. The main characters approached the table where the dish was waiting for them. Cruel involuntarily sighed, noting how appetizing it looked. In front of them stood a plate, and next to it a saucepan from which steam rose over slices of meat. The girl asked Hang what kind of brown soup it was. The man explained that it was based on miso. He noticed her confusion. The hero extended his hand and explained in detail that it was a seasoning made from fermented soybeans with added salt and malted rice. He insistently offered her a taste, assuring her of its excellent taste. The girl took the chopsticks and put a piece of meat in her mouth. Suddenly, Cruel's eyes widened and sparkled. She smiled. A loud cry escaped from her chest. She exclaimed that it was simply delicious. The girl was truly happy. The man said that while serving at court, he had some free time and devoted it to improving his culinary skills. He thanked Cruel for her support, offering her as much food as she liked. The girl, holding the bowl, continued to eat with pleasure, nodding approvingly. At that very moment, Hang, sitting next to the peacefully sleeping Sue and finishing the last of the knives, was deeply immersed in his own thoughts. He still couldn't fully comprehend or even understand how he had managed to forge such a perfect knife, which apparently had the incredible and previously unattainable S rank. He wondered if the grueling training and stern reprimands from his master had been in vain. He remembered how the blacksmith had constantly scolded him for his work. The hero himself had always thought that his products barely reached the D or E ranks. Sitting at the table and slowly devouring a simple but nutritious meal, he suddenly wondered with sincere warmth how his old but wise mentor was doing now. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, the blacksmith took a drag on his pipe, expressing his hope that everything was going well for Hang. Two people, noticing this, approached him and remarked that he often mentioned his former apprentice. One of them added that he thought he didn't like the hero. The man winced, and his face took on a puzzled expression. He honestly didn't understand what was going on. He wondered who had said that he didn't like his former apprentice. The assistants explained that he was always shouting. One of them added that he didn't even come to see him off. The blacksmith only chuckled, admitting that it was quite in his style. He explained that the young man simply hadn't mentally matured to his true rank. The two assistants inquired about the rank of the swords and armor created by their former colleague. The man took a deep drag and replied that they were at least A rank. The assistants winced and then cried out in surprise. The head blacksmith crossed his arms and remarked that if he had revealed this fact back then, the apprentice would certainly have become proud. He added that since he was a B rank, he should create weapons accordingly. The assistants began to look at each other, discussing what they had heard. They were amazed, because blacksmiths who could create A-rank weapons were a great rarity. The chief blacksmith quickly stood up from his seat. He exclaimed loudly, calling them idiots. He said they should try giving such a weapon to an ordinary soldier, adding that it was too dangerous to even look at. The men paused, admitting he was right. The question arose as to why Hang had been banished if he had been so talented. The man sat down again and lit a cigarette. He guessed that the king must have thought long and hard about this decision. One of his aides asked if the monarch had no hidden agenda and had simply exiled the boy without thinking it over. The chief blacksmith took a deep drag and looked into the distance. He said slowly that if that were the case, it would mean the end of their country. Dawn came, and the first rays of the sun illuminated the forest house. Suddenly, a muffled cry was heard from Hang, who was calling for help. The girl woke up and sleepily rubbed her eyes. Approaching the master, she asked what he was doing, because they were supposed to have a day off. Her gaze fell on the stove standing outside. She asked if he had built it himself. The man wanted to check something. He explained that if the secret to creating an S rank was in this furnace, he would need to hone his skills in another one. He stepped aside, explaining that it was difficult to control the temperature outside, and asked Cruel to help him. The girl perked up. The protagonist turned to Cruel for help. Then she dragged an impressive bucket. Meanwhile, the man began the forging process. The air was filled with the rhythmic blows of the hammer, spreading over the metal. The hero thought, if that furnace held the secret of rank S, then he should test his skill on another one. He stepped forward, explaining that it was difficult to control the temperature outside, and asked Cruel for help. The girl perked up and agreed with obvious pleasure. The man then dragged a large bucket filled with water to the blazing furnace, while Hang, standing at the forge, began the forging process. The air was filled with the rhythmic blows of the hammer, spreading over the red-hot metal. Under its influence, the red-hot blank slowly but surely took on the shape of the future weapon. Standing side by side, the heroes heard Hang's loud cry that everything was ready. The girl held a knife in her hands, glowing and sparkling. She was amazed, because the blade forged on the street turned out to be just as excellent. The man glanced at the finished weapon, noting to himself that, without any appraisal skills, he couldn't tell whether it was S or A rank. Suddenly, his gaze fell on a tree stump standing nearby. The girl turned to Hang, asking what it was. He reached out to his own glowing blade. It was a sword that had been broken in a fight with an armed soldier in the city earlier, the pieces of which he had picked up. Hang walked up to the stump and, after a few swings, struck the blade. It only left a small nick, but the blade did not break in half. The hero thought, the knife he forged in that furnace had cut the king's sword completely, while this blade had only cut halfway. This meant that the weapon was of rank A. He handed the knife to Cruel, noting that there was definitely some kind of power hidden in that furnace. Hang looked at it with a questioning expression, noting that the knife they had made was nonetheless quite good. Suddenly, the girl's ears caught a sound and began to move. She immediately jumped up, exclaiming that they had a client. The man didn't even immediately understand what she was talking about. At that very second, the girl turned into a mighty dragon and soared into the sky above the trees to take someone. Hang just watched the dragon fly away. However, not even a few seconds passed before the dragon returned. The man was covered in sweat. It was Miss Filner. She greeted Master Hang, shaking all over from astonishment and fear. They walked into a small house located in the forest. The man apologized to Miss Filner for frightening her and handed her a cup of water. However, she replied that everything was fine. The heroes only looked sympathetically at the frightened girl, noting how sorry they were. But she, taking a sip of water, noted that there was no need to apologize, and next time she would just jump into the carriage and come on her own. Cruel beat her chest, declaring that the forest of Druid was full of monsters, and that it was extremely dangerous to come here without an escort. She added that if anything happened, she could carry the cart herself, quickly and safely. Miss Filner only looked away and thanked her. Then she made a displeased face, saying that she came with important news. She had complaints about their knife. This news made the heroes perk up. They had not expected to hear complaints at all. Cruel instantly became aggressive, her eyes lit up. She didn't understand what complaints were being made, because Hang's knives were amazing, and she couldn't imagine what could be wrong with them. The man quickly turned to Cruel, urging her to calm down, and anxiously asked what the problem was. Filner only looked down and quietly said that the knife was too good. The heroes present seemed to freeze for a moment, not immediately grasping the meaning of what she was trying to convey. However, the woman slowly raised her gaze and with startling clarity reported that the blade was simply too sharp. She then continued her story, telling those present that quite recently one of these seemingly perfect blades was sold by her to a young and still rather inexperienced novice cook. And this same cook, through his own carelessness, accidentally dropped the blade, which, by the way, barely slid along his hand, but fortunately, nothing serious or life-threatening happened at that moment. Miss Filner went on to explain that the real shock came from what happened next. The knife blade sank into the floor up to the hilt. The heroes shuddered, shocked by this news. Their faces reflected horror and foreboding. The girl knelt before Master Hang, while the others watched silently. She leaned over and admitted that she understood the uniqueness of his technique and the titanic efforts that went into achieving such perfection. Then, closing her eyes, she said that her request might seem rude, but could they please make the knives a little less sharp? The protagonist also closed his eyes, thinking about how insulting it would be to ask a blacksmith to intentionally degrade his creation. He knew that Miss Filner was aware of this. That's why she feels so embarrassed. The man asked her to raise her head. She obediently did as he asked. He looked at her with a smile and assured her that he would create a knife that would be less sharp. The hero admitted that this hurt his pride to some extent, but stressed that the safety and convenience of users are most important. Tears welled up in the shopkeeper's eyes, She turned to Master Hang. The protagonist then handed her one of the knives, saying that he had recently forged something similar. The girl used appraisal magic and confirmed that this knife was also an A rank. Filner's assessment confirmed the blacksmith's theory. The item he had forged was clearly a rank below the previous one. He still didn't understand why, but the knives created in that special furnace invariably outranked his usual work. Hang said that if this option suited her, he would continue to create such knives. The girl stood up, and they shook hands. She sincerely thanked the master. A few days later, Miss Filner arrived again in a cart to the protagonist. Her face was shining with happiness and a smile. She joyfully shouted to Master Hang that all the goods were sold out. The man did not immediately believe her words, and a slight sweat appeared on his face. The girl explained that the knives were literally selling like hotcakes. This time, she decided to target housewives and was not mistaken. She was immediately surrounded by a crowd of women wanting to buy knives. The man admitted that he was amazed by her trading skills. In response, the girl simply patted him on the shoulder in a friendly manner, noting that it was entirely due to his knives, and that he should not be modest. They both burst out laughing. Then the girl, crossing her arms over her chest, calmly announced that their workshop had already received a large number of additional orders, and asked whether it would be possible to make another 100 of these knives. The colossal figure she mentioned literally stunned the man, causing his heart to skip a few beats. He tried to comprehend that he really had to create a whole 100 more of these items, and he began to tremble. However, Miss Filner, noticing his confusion, patted him on the back encouragingly, radiating confidence in his skill, because right now a completely new page was opening in the history of his forge, full of recognition. In response to her words, the hero only laughed timidly, not only with relief, but also with a feeling of growing excitement, which mixed with the anticipation of a huge job. Suddenly, as if in the blink of an eye, a powerful thunderstorm erupted in the sky, instantly enveloping everything around in an impenetrable, ominous darkness that swallowed up the last glimmer of daylight. Sharp lightning pierced the dense forest thicket, momentarily illuminating the silhouettes of the trees. A young girl with unusual pointed ears wandered uncertainly through the wet forest. Her clothes were soaking wet, and she herself looked dejected. She whispered the words, "Mom and Dad," quietly, almost inaudibly, through trembling lips, her voice full of despair as she stood in the middle of this rainy forest, completely unsure of which direction she should move. The rain raged outside the window, enveloping the forest in a thick, impenetrable wall of water. It fell in a continuous stream on the dilapidated roof of the house. The leaky roof couldn't cope with the pressure, and drops of water beat out a monotonous rhythm in a bucket placed under a particularly large leak. The man watched this scene with growing alarm, fearing that the house was about to be flooded, and their meager possessions would be hopelessly ruined. Suddenly, Cruel came up behind him, completely silently. She gave a sharp, piercing scream, intending to frighten him. The man flinched. His shoulders involuntarily jumped in surprise, and he almost dropped the mug from his hands. The girl, soaking wet and with her hair stuck to her face, just smiled contentedly. Pleased with her trick, she asked Hang if she had succeeded in scaring him. Hang asked Cruel what the expression on her face was, but thanked her anyway for her help. The girl remarked that she looked like she had taken a bath, to which the man replied that she was wet. She was the one who had climbed onto the roof, boarding up the holes. His girlfriend declared that she was a dragon and couldn't catch a cold, but then sneezed loudly and demonstratively. Hang, seeing that she was still completely wet, advised her to say such things to someone else. Cruel was soaking wet, her clothes and hair dripping with water. Turning away to hide a slight smile, the man handed the girl a fluffy towel. They decided to warm her not only with the warmth of the fire, but also with delicious, hot food. Cruel exclaimed joyfully and asked eagerly what they would have for dinner today. Thick aromatic steam rose from a large cast-iron pot on the hearth. The hero lifted the lid, and inside was rich meat. He explained that it was stewed pork, or more precisely, the meat of the boar they had hunted a few days earlier. The girl noticed how tender it was, and the broth was thick and rich. After sending a large piece into her mouth, she exclaimed that it was simply delicious. She closed her eyes, immersing herself in pure pleasure, enjoying the delicate and incredibly rich taste, which, according to her, she had never tasted before. Hang, laughing, asked if she didn't say that every time she ate his cooking. The girl vigorously shook her hands and assured him that everything the master cooked was always extraordinary, simply magically delicious. However, despite the praise, Hang remained a little dissatisfied. He noted that if only they could find other, more varied ingredients, the dishes would become even more perfect and delicious. In the world he now lived in, there were miso and soy sauce. It seemed that there was even a whole culture of making dashi broth based on clever techniques. He wondered if this tradition was passed down by the heroes summoned from his home world. Hang folded his arms and decided that it was probably time for him to eat too. However, looking forward, he was surprised to find that his own bowl of food was completely missing. There were only chopsticks on the table. The man blinked in confusion, trying to comprehend what had happened. He turned to Cruel, noting that she didn't have to take his portion as well. The girl frowned and, putting another juicy piece of meat into her mouth, grumbled discontentedly that she had not eaten his portion and would never have done such a thing. The protagonist, full of curiosity, asked who had taken this strange girl. However, Cruel, without waiting for an answer, closed his mouth and quietly asked him to be quiet, putting a finger to her lips, calling for silence. At this time, something was shaking and rumbling under the table, creating an atmosphere of tension. The main characters, exchanging glances, decisively moved closer to each other. Gathering their courage, they crawled under the table. Their hearts were pounding with anticipation of the unexpected. But what they saw made their eyes widen in surprise. Under the table sat a girl with cat ears, oblivious to her surroundings, stuffing a piece of fresh meat into her mouth. Suddenly, the protagonist stood up and exclaimed loudly, perplexed by what was happening. The girl crawled out from under the table, all wet and confused. Cruel, without wasting time, grabbed her by the hair and screamed loudly, demanding that she stop. The girl started and did not know what to answer. The girl angrily declared that she was a thief and had stolen Hane's food. In response, the cat girl sat down on the floor with her head down. She looked scared and quickly apologized, explaining that she was very hungry. Cruel, not wanting to forgive her misdeed, sternly noted that even if she was hungry, it did not give her the right to take someone else's. However, the man intervened and asked the girl to calm down, because Cruel had already scolded her enough. The girl was trembling with fear and was shocked by what was happening. Hang turned to her with concern, noticing that she was all wet. The girl introduced herself as Sue, and told him that was her name. The man began to dry her wet things, trying to help. The protagonist introduced himself as Hang and asked what she was doing in the rain. At that moment, Sue's face changed. She began to cry and asked the hero to help her find her mom and dad. Sue's wet clothes and towels were drying on the rope. The main character sat opposite her and asked her why she was lost. The girl, not paying attention to the questions, continued to eat from the plate in front of her and noted that it was very tasty. Cruel asked if she was from the tribe of white wolves. The man fell silent, embarrassed, not understanding what was being discussed. Sue continued to enjoy her meal and looked very happy. The girl explained that the white wolves were a tribe of divine beasts, living in the forests of the Druids. Hearing the word divine, the man's face changed, and he stood up from his seat in surprise. Cruel made a calm face and noted that she was much stronger than these creatures. She began to explain about Druid, the forest of gods, beasts, and spirits, where magical creatures live. Most of them are gods and spirits. They have their own territory, but the white wolves are a wandering tribe. The protagonist was puzzled because he did not know the meaning of the word wandering and could not imagine the scale of this forest. The girl answered him that the forest was equal to approximately 200 human cities. The man was amazed by this number. He was amazed by such vast spaces. He looked at Sue and noticed how lost she looked in such a big world. The girl hung her head in sadness. However, Cruel interrupted his thoughts. There was no point in feeling sorry for her. She had probably done something to anger the leader of her tribe. The man asked if she had been kicked out of the pack. Cruel calmly replied that such things sometimes happened. But Sue interrupted her indignantly, because that was not so. She was full of emotion and explained that it was hard for children to keep up with adults. When you get off track, you lose track of where you are. The protagonist wondered if that meant she couldn't keep up with her pack. He looked at Sue, and she was crying. Memories of 15 years of injustice and failure replayed in his mind. The girl turned to Hang with hope. He stroked her head, and the man said in a soothing voice that he would help her find her parents. At these words, Sue raised her head a little and smiled. Cruel watched this scene from behind, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression not auguring anything good. The sky gradually cleared up, and the rain finally stopped. The main characters walked through the forest, carefully stepping on the numerous puddles left by the recent bad weather. Everyone was in high spirits, and Sue, dressed in warm clothes, walked ahead with genuine joy on her face. Hang, watching her carefully, reminded her not to run too far, because it could be dangerous. The girl turned around and replied with a smile that she was fine, but suddenly she tripped over a protruding branch and, as if in slow motion, flew forward. The main character quickly grabbed her by the back, preventing her from falling. Her face reflected complete bewilderment, and she, looking at him with gratitude, said thank you. The girl stood nearby and watched this scene with slight displeasure. Cruel turned to him with a reproach, asking him not to spoil the girl too much. There was jealousy in her eyes. She could not help but notice how Hang showed concern for Sue. Hang, trying to calm her down, replied that it was all right, because Sue was still a child. The girl, meanwhile, happily ran around them, ignoring the warnings. Cruel closed her eyes and sighed, explaining that Sue was a divine being and the forest's nature could be very harsh. In her opinion, spoiling the girl would be harmful to her development. Hang merely nodded in agreement, but then Sue exclaimed loudly, asking if he really understood what Cruel was talking about. At this point, the hero turned to his friend and noted that he understood her concern about Sue and that she might not like this girl. Surprise was reflected on the girl's face. She slapped her tail on the ground and said confidently that it wasn't that. Suddenly, everything around her became brightly lit, and Hang felt himself being carried away from the approaching glow. Cruel transformed into a mighty dragon and soared into the air. From her heights, she could see everything around her and growled loudly to wait for her, as she would look for the wolves. Sue looked up at the dragon, her eyes wide with surprise. Meanwhile, Cruel flew into the sky in search of the girl's parents or a similar flock. Hang stayed behind with Sue and watched as the dragon disappeared into the distance. He took out his camping kit and began to forge knives, the sounds of the hammer echoing through the forest. However, he soon noticed something strange to the side, but Cruel still had not returned. Turning his attention to Sue, he saw that the girl was sleeping on the ground, curled up in a ball. She looked so defenseless and peaceful, and there was a slight smile on her face. Hang thought to himself that he should have told her earlier that she wanted to sleep. He stroked her head gently and wondered how he was being a parent. He looked up at the sky and was once again lost in his thoughts about what was happening around them. It was comforting to know that he and Sue were now on this journey together. The dog seemed very hungry. Sue heard something and became alert. She continued to listen and asked the hero not to disturb her. The girl realized that the ash hounds were approaching. Hang understood that these hounds were only C-rank demons, but there was a whole pack of them which was dangerous. The hero asked the girl in which direction the demons had not yet been heard. She answered that in the south. Hang decided to leave immediately. Sue was worried about the things she had left behind, but the man assured her that they would pick them up later. The creatures were catching up with them. The girl was scared and asked the hero to run faster. The man replied that he was already an old man and a former hero. Hang thought that even though he was a decoration without any special skills, he still had a lot of strength. Thanks to the mage who summoned the man from his world, the hero had more physical strength than anyone else. He reassured himself that the forge was already very close. The man only hoped to run to the forge, because animals do not like fire, and do not go near a forge that contains it. The hero was already counting on his victory when they managed to catch up with him. The hounds seemed angry and hungry. They inspired fear. Hang realized they were surrounded. The creatures were quite smart. The man let Sue down from his arms. The hero shielded the girl with his body and held out the knife he had forged himself, preparing to defend himself. Hang thought about what to do, because there were too many enemies. He had to protect the girl. Sue stepped out from behind the hero and headed towards the hounds. The man told her to go back. The beast woman began to bark at the enemies. The hero was impressed. Hang wondered why he was even standing there watching the girl try so hard. He admitted that Sue was much braver than he was. The man wondered if he was even worthy of the title of hero. In his opinion, a person who cannot protect even a child does not deserve to be called a decoration. The dog rushed at Sue. The girl closed her eyes and cowered, but they managed to save her. Heiji managed to cover the girl and swing his knife to kill the enemy. He succeeded. He looked pleased. But the other creatures didn't care. They continued to grin and call the others dog that might be nearby. The hero wondered what to do. Heiji realized who was the leader of the pack. The man knew that he needed to deal with the leader. Suddenly, someone called out to them. It was a dragon who stood up for his friends. Cruel was angry. She was indignant at how the hounds dared to mock her friends. Heiji and Sue recognized their friend, who easily dealt with the enemies. The surviving demons retreated. The hero noticed this. He was worried that the survivors would start hanging around the forge and pose a potential threat. However, the hounds were not allowed to escape. They were dealt with by wolves from the Sioux tribe. The wolves saw Heiji and noted that someone was taking care of their girl. The hero was impressed by their strength, because they did not even seem exhausted. The wolves thanked the human for protecting Sue. Cruel turned into a humanoid form and ran to Heiji, whom she immediately hugged. The dragon apologized for leaving the hero alone and was incredibly happy that he was safe. The wolves happily hugged Sue, who was finally happy to be found. Cruel also thanked Sue for protecting the blacksmith. The girl did not understand her. The dragon explained that she heard the barking and found out where they were. The girl also understood that the wolf cub protected her friend. Cruel was very grateful to her. Sue was given a cowbell as a gift to the divine beast. The blacksmith explained that if the girl was separated from her family again, they would be able to find her by the sound. Sue liked the gift. Heiji told her to take care of herself. The wolves said goodbye to the heroes. The blacksmith's fried eggs disappeared from his plate. He thought that Cruel had eaten his portion, so he asked her to tell him directly if she wanted to eat, so as not to eat secretly and under her breath. The girl was indignant because she had not eaten the food. After all, her plate was empty, although she was very hungry. Suddenly, the dragon and the man began to suspect something. It turned out that Sue had eaten the eggs. The girl said that she was lost again. At this time, it was raining heavily in the kingdom. The man knew that if it continued to rain so heavily, he would only have more work to do. The prime minister shouted at the workers and ordered them to stop the leak. He screamed that the rain was staining the blue rose, a carpet dyed blue using a special technique that was the envy of other kingdoms. The prime minister screamed that it was leaking everywhere. The man ordered the leak to be stopped. The prime minister left in anger, while the workers grinned at the situation. They understood that all the corridors of the palace were leaking, and in general, this situation was happening everywhere. One of the workers wondered why the forge had not been making tiles for a long time, believing that this could be the cause of the leak. Another worker recalled that about 2 or 3 years after Heiji arrived, the leaks somehow stopped. The workers remembered that the roof of the forge differed from the others in its tiles. They recognized the roof as beautiful. The foreman announced that the break was over and it was time to get back to work. The man wondered what Heiji was doing now. The girls asked the blacksmith what they would do today. The hero thought that they should remodel the barn. The dragon did not understand him. The man added that he wanted to remove walls and add more rooms. He wanted to add a room for Sue and a guest room. Heiji explained that the wolf cub was prone to straying from the pack, so was temporarily under his care. Therefore, they needed a room for her and guests in general. But the main task for the blacksmith today is to replace the tiles on the roof and the forge. The girls did not know what tiles were. The man explained that these are clay bricks, which are very strong and heat resistant. They are laid in layers on top of each other. The master demonstrated this clearly with his hands. The hero explained that a tiled roof keeps the house cool in the summer and warm in the winter. It retains heat, so it is ideal for a blacksmith. Cruel realized that the tiles looked like her scales. The hero suggested going together and getting some clay from the nearest mountain. The girls were ready to help him. The boys collected the clay. Now it needed to be kneaded. Sue called Heiji of Cruel out of clay. The blacksmith noted that the girl had a talent for art. The figurine was very well made. The man asked Sue to help him. She agreed. The girl saw a strange thing. She asked Heiji if it was a weapon. The master replied that it was an extruder. Heiji explained how to use the extruder. First, the material is loaded. Put the clay in the upper part. The second stage of use is shaping. You need to put a board with a handle on top then press. The blacksmith added that the main thing is to push the clay straight out. If you don't do that, it will crack when it dries. The third step is cutting the workpiece with thread. The girls did a good job with the task. The fourth stage is drying. The boys laid out the cut clay and left it to dry for several days. Now the boys needed a stove to bake the clay. The blacksmith suggested digging a hole in the street and making a simple stove out of it. The girls did the job too. They dug 2 holes and connected them underground so that the fire could be kept going by circulating oxygen. Hang explained that they would use the kiln to bake tiles. The 5th step is glazing. The blacksmiths dipped the tiles into the glaze and dried them again, because if they were not dried properly, the product would crack during firing. The 6th stage is firing. The processed tiles are placed in a kiln, where they are kept on low heat for a long time. After the entire process was completed, the tiles were ready. The girls were impressed that they had real tiles that were still shiny and slippery. The man explained that if you glaze the clay, its surface will be covered with a glassy substance that repels water and dirt. The blacksmith announced that the roof now needed to be laid. The man was laying the roof, and the girls were helping him. The girlfriends were happy that they got the job done so quickly. However, Hang said that there was no need to get too excited just yet, as they still had to check that there were no leaks in the roof. Standing on the tiles, the blacksmith used water magic and summoned a stream that crashed down on the roof of the barn. Hang almost fell off the roof, but everything turned out well. He asked Sue if there were any leaks. She said there weren't. The guys were very happy that everything worked out for them. The man remembered that when he lived at the palace, he was not only a blacksmith, he also worked part-time. He was once called to make tiles because the foreman did not have enough workers. At that time, unglazed tiles were fashionable red, but not particularly durable, so they had to be replaced frequently. Hang was sent out to change the tiles very often, so he made a glaze and began using it. In the end, the hero made the roof of the forge from durable tiles with glaze, but this did not take root in the palace, so they left the traditional one there. The man hoped that because of this roof, the rains did not flood the palace. The Prime Minister was very worried about the palace carpet. For the man, the flood in the castle was a real disaster. Hang asked Cruel to bring the pots and pans. She brought them and asked what they were. The hero allowed her to open them and look. She looked into the pot. It contained very tasty food that looked appetizing. The girls immediately began to eat and thanked the hero for her. The blacksmith asked them to wait a minute. Hang offered them oil to try out the full spectrum of flavors. Cruel asked what he was offering them. Sue guessed clay. The hero ordered to cut the potatoes and put a piece of butter on top, which immediately melted. The girls noted that it looked delicious. They were impressed and asked to try it. The girls were impressed and ate potatoes with butter as if it was their first time eating. The man asked them to calm down because butter was expensive. Hang sold several knives to buy butter, which is considered a luxury item in this world. Potatoes with butter were a reward for the boys' hard work. A few days later, the hero wanted to cut down a tree that looked good. He had already swung his axe when a ball of strange light appeared on the trunk. The man got scared. The girls immediately came running and began to complain about why he was trying to cut down the tree. They can't be cut down, otherwise he will get angry. Hang didn't understand them. He asked again who would be angry. Cruel replied that it was Druita. The blacksmith thought it was just the name of the forest. The dragon explained that Druita was the god of this forest, and a very important one. The god would be angry if Hang cut down the tree. Sue confirmed that Druid is very scary when angry, and he is stronger than her mom and dad. The blacksmith asked what would happen to him if he cut down the tree. The dragon answered that he would then disappear from this world. This shocked the man. Then Hang asked about the ball of light that had appeared before him. Cruel explained that it was a piece of God that sometimes appeared as light. The blacksmith understood the girl, but he said that they still needed the wood to build an extension to the hut. The dragon explained that in such a case, it was necessary to make an offering to Druid, which had to be placed near the tree. The hero wondered what he could offer. The light ball offered to give him oil. Hang replied that it was already finished, and he wondered how God knew about oil. Druita reminded him of what was in the wooden box. The girls became angry with the man because he told them that the oil had already run out. The hero felt the seed embarrassed. The blacksmith gave Druita potatoes with butter. The girls assured the hero that the god was happy, and he said that the butter was tasty. Svet told the man that he should take care of the tree he would cut down, and flew away from the boys. Sometime after the tree was safely cut down, the construction was completed and all the rooms were ready. Suddenly, an unfamiliar girl came to the vicinity of the blacksmith's hut, who recognized this house in the forest. In the tavern, an armed elf attacked people. She threw one of the men far away. He thought that his hour had already struck. The girl said that her sword was not meant to kill people like him. The girl behind the counter, as a token of gratitude, asked the warrior to order something on the house. The cook had a knife made by Hang in his hands. The elf noticed it, took it in her hands, and addressed the girl, calling her mistress. The tavern owner said that she already had a husband. The warrior asked who made this knife. The girl replied that she had bought it from a merchant named Filner, who often traded with their shop. Filner then stated that the knife was very good, and, as an advertisement, simply asked to try it out. Having heard the necessary information, the elf left. She was called. Where did she go? The men in the tavern asked each other if it was the dark elf swordswoman, Belphivia. Belphivia was known as the Purple Thunder. Cruel had already forged knives herself. She asked Hang how he would rate her product. The blacksmith began to examine it carefully, which made the dragon a little nervous. The man noted that the knife turned out pretty good. It was a good job. The girl was very happy. Hang admitted to himself that he was still amazed at her ability to withstand the heat. He noted that Cruel would make a good blacksmith. He told her that she had done a good job. The girl replied that she enjoyed doing something with her own hands, and the main reason for her success was that Hang was her master. The man was slightly puzzled. She asked him why he was thinking. Was he embarrassed? The blacksmith replied that he was not. He admitted that it was the first time someone had said such a thing to him. He thanked the girl and tugged at the top of her head. The dragon felt ticklish. Sue called the blacksmiths to eat. The girl asked what was inside the balls. The girl said it was a secret and let her eat. There was a boiled egg inside. Cruel really liked the taste. Hang decided to try it too. But the man couldn't make out the filling and asked what it was. Sue replied that it was wild strawberry. She asked him how it tasted. The hero replied that the dish had a unique taste, and the wild strawberry itself was very tasty. He liked the dish. The wolf cub said that she would then cook more pies so that the children could eat their fill. The blacksmith suggested returning to work immediately after eating. The girls supported him. In a few days, the boys managed to make 100 knives on time. The blacksmith thanked Cruel for her help in the blacksmith. The dragon noted that Hang could sell swords with greater success than knives. The man had a similar thought, but he thought about stopping with knives for now. The girl did not try to convince the hero. The blacksmith noticed that it was time to pick up the goods, but Filner was not there yet. The dragon suggested going to check. Sue said that the merchant had already arrived. Filner cried and apologized for being late. The girl said there was someone who wanted to see Hang. It was Belphivia. She apologized and said she had no choice. The elf asked not to blame the merchant for being late. The dragon asked seriously who she was. Belphivia was surprised. The elf introduced herself to the heroes. She asked to be called Belf. The girl admitted that she didn't really like her name, so it didn't matter to her to be called by her full name. The hero asked why the elf didn't like her name. Sue said she was afraid of the elf. The wolf cub hid behind the blacksmith. The elf hugged the girl and said that she was a cutie. She admitted that she had never seen white wolf babies and wanted to take Sue home with her. The wolf cub was very scared. Cruel covered the girl with herself and told the elf that Sue did not like what the elf was doing. Belf immediately switched to the dragon. She said that she did not know who Cruel was, but the girl had good muscles. The dragon yelled at the guest. The girls rushed to Hang to help them. The man asked the elf to stop, as his friends were uncomfortable. He turned to Belf because she wanted to see him. The elf justified herself by saying that when she sees something beautiful, she cannot resist the desire to touch it. Belf said she had heard rumors that the blacksmith made very sharp knives, so in recognition of Hang's skill, she wanted the craftsman to take a look at her sword. He took the weapon for inspection. The elf asked what the blacksmith thought of it. The man said that the sword needed some work. Belf asked what he meant. The blacksmith noticed that the sharpening was rough in places, and the blade was slightly curved. He added that an experienced swordsman might feel a slight tension when cutting. The elf accepted Hang's comment and said that normal evaluators would give the sword an A or B grade. But the man was clearly different from them. The hero admitted that he had no evaluation magic. Belf then offered to appraise the next weapon for the blacksmith. The blacksmith took out the broken blade. He seemed very confused. The girl asked the hero what was wrong with him. He looked unwell. Sue asked if he was okay. Hang recognized the broken sword as he had forged it. The man was very upset and apologized to the girl. The elf didn't expect the hero to forge it. Hang admitted that he wasn't the most experienced blacksmith. Belf protested, saying it was nonsense. She confirmed that the sword was broken, but it was a very good sword. The girl assured that any sword eventually breaks, and this one lasted 3 years with a rough swordsman like Belf. She said that if she hadn't had to fight that monster, the weapon would have lasted a couple more years. The blacksmith was caught by the phrase about the monster, but the elf said that this was not important information. Belf said that in any case, the sword that Hang forged was beautiful. The merchant was amazed that the famous swordswoman, Purple Thunder, recognized the hero. The man didn't believe that the elf had used his sword. The girl replied that she used him only because he was worthy of it, and the elf had one request. She asked the blacksmith to forge a similar sword for her. The man did not believe her words. The elf asked not to be surprised. She said that she had been using his creation all the time. Hang replied that there was a blacksmith better than him at the royal court. Belf said that the hero did not understand her, because the first sword she gave him to examine was made at the royal court. The master did not understand how this could happen. The elf noted that it was indeed curious. She herself could not believe her eyes that such a sword could be made in the royal forge. Hang remembered weapons of similar quality that he had seen in the city. Belf asked again to forge a sword for her. The hero suddenly noticed the scar and the damaged eye of the elf. The girl was a little embarrassed that the man noticed this, because she tried to hide her eye with her bangs. The elf explained that this wound dated back to her youth. The man understood that this was not peaceful Japan. This was a world where monsters and beasts were everywhere. Hang understood that if Belf ordered the sword from someone else, he would do it from someone else and still return to battle. And because of a bad sword, the girl could lose her life. The blacksmith admitted to himself that he could not bear the thought that someone had died because of him. The hero declared that he would not create weapons for murder. He said that he would forge a sword to protect Belf. The girl was very grateful to the master. The man thanked the elf for trusting him. They made a deal. Forging a sword took Hang much longer than making a knife. A sword takes at least 10 days. But Miss Belf was willing to wait. The blacksmith got ready and began to work. The hero chose damask steel for his sword. The man explained to the girls that steel is a metal processed in a special way. The temperature of the steel reaches 1,500 to 1,600 degrees Celsius, which is almost twice as high as in the production of knives, where it is only 900 degrees. Hang asked Cruel to help him. She was overjoyed. And Sue was ready to clean up. The blacksmith set to work. They started with drawing, which stretches and contracts the steel. Then the boys did a reheating. They put the crushed steel together for melting, took it out of the furnace and added ash. This process increases the purity of the steel. Then the blacksmiths would stack the blanks and beat them, then cover them with ash again, and repeat everything again. The blacksmiths moved on to the forging stage, taking turns striking the metal with sledgehammers. Cruel noted that making weapons is a difficult business. Hang added that Japanese swords are particularly difficult to make because they have to be forged layer by layer. The dragon asked why the hero finally decided to make the sword, since he had previously refused. Hang thought. He asked if Cruel didn't like that he was making weapons. The girl replied that she didn't mind. The hero said that he wanted to test his strength and understand what he could do at all. The sword that Miss Belf brought, he made a long time ago. And now he wants to repeat this sword, and the blacksmith also wanted to see what he could do now. In addition, Hang's new forge possessed a mysterious power. The master believed that he could make an amazing sword if he combined this power with his increased skills. The hero told Cruel that he was glad for this opportunity. He admitted that he had never felt such excitement before. He was having fun. Hang was more excited about his work than ever before. The work was completed. The sword was ready. The girl said that the product was very beautiful. Cruel offered to try the sword. The hero agreed. They decided to test the sword on a tree. After presenting it to the deity, the hero prepared to chop. He swung the weapon. Druida's light appeared. The girl was shouted at to make the man look higher. Hang struck. The blacksmith was impressed. He was on all fours, and his girlfriends were asking if he was okay. The boys couldn't believe that Hang was able to completely cut down a tree in one blow. It dawned on the blacksmith that he had just made a very good weapon. A few days later, I returned for the bluff product. The man apologized for the sword having to wait. However, the elf noticed that Hang was very proud of her work. He couldn't deny it. The warrior wanted to look at the weapon. The girls were impressed by the blacksmith's work. The merchant immediately realized that even without an assessment, it was clear that the sword was not lower than A rank. She corrected herself and said that the product was S rank. The elf said that the sword was heavier than she expected. However, when she started moving, the sword seemed amazingly light. The master suggested that the girl try the weapon. To test the sword, they took a bundle of iron ingots the size of a human torso. Hang knew that such a bundle would be impossible to completely cut, even if the sword was made at the royal court, so the blacksmith relied on Miss Bluff's skill in the forged sword. The elf struck. The product remained intact. The sword did its job perfectly. All the girls were impressed. The hero was pleased, as was the swordswoman. The elf said that Hang's sword was very impressive. She put in very little effort, and the result was already like this. The girl joked that if she had been serious, the blow would have cut the man in half. The warrior was very grateful to the blacksmith for his work. She said that with this weapon, she could now defeat even a monster. The elf asked how much she would have to pay for the weapon. The master replied that she would pay nothing. He decided that it would be compensation for the previous broken sword. The girl reminded him once again that all swords break sooner or later. The blacksmith didn't have to worry about that, so she asked him to accept the payment once more. The merchant confirmed the warrior's words. She stated that working for free is a denial of responsibility for one's work. Hang agreed with the girls and offered 30 gold pieces for the sword. Belf stated that this was a very low price, because even the worst sword made at the royal court was worth 100 gold coins. The blacksmith assured that his price was the cost of the materials. The elf asked what the price of the hero's own labor was. The girl began to worry that the man wanted something more than money. But Hang didn't understand what she was talking about. Belf to teach him how to use a sword instead of gold. The girl asked again about the offer. The man wanted to learn how to use a sword, like the one he had just forged. The name of the sword was Shadow Strike. Hang his wishes, but she wanted to know why he was doing this. The hero replied that he would have to become a little stronger if he decided to stay here. The man said he needed to learn how to handle a weapon to protect himself and his loved ones. Belf understood him. She suggested a trial match. Hang didn't want to engage in a duel because he didn't even know the basics. The warrior replied that the foundation was indeed important, but the hero would not understand this until he began to practice. The elf told the man not to worry. She assured him that she would not go all out in the fight, but she noted to herself that she would not do this, at least at the beginning of training. The elf and the man got ready. Sue and the vendor supported them. Hang was a little nervous. The warrior was calm. Bluff asked the master what he liked better, Yuke or seam. The blacksmith did not understand her. He asked in what sense he liked better. The elf swung her sword and replied that apparently he liked Yuke better. The man asked the warrior to wait, but she had already struck. The hero managed to block the blow. Bluff noted that the blacksmith seemed to have skill. He replied that it was just a reaction. The girl suggested trying something different. She attacked again. Hang continued to defend and block his opponent's sword. However, this time, the blows were more powerful than before. It already seemed to the hero that the elf was hitting him like that because she wanted to kill him. The blacksmith assumed that he was able to resist because he had the hero growth skill. Hangi began to adapt to the blows right during the battle. The elf also noticed this and suggested speeding up a little. The man did not agree. He decided that the warrior was making fun of him. He asked her to wait a little longer, but Bluff stepped up her attack. The blacksmith noticed that the speed and weight had changed. The girl encouraged him. She said that the hero was doing a great job. However, the elf stated that they still had a lot of work to do. Hang was panicking. He knew he couldn't continue the fight like this. He was trying to think of something before the girl killed him. He had to time it just right. The blows came at high speed, sometimes from the left, sometimes from the right. The hero waited for the right moment and threw himself flat on his opponent. He knocked down the girl and they lost their swords, but the warrior prepared a knife and put it to the man's throat. Hang suggested ending the duel. The elf said that on the battlefield you can't win by simply pushing back the enemy. The man saw himself, frightened, in the reflection of the warrior's eyes. He apologized and said he was giving up. The girl noted that the maneuver he had performed was not bad. Belf said that when the blacksmith pushed her, she thought he might do something indecent. The man told her not to think of anything. The hero even wondered if all dark elves were like this girl. Hang's girlfriends came to see him. They were very happy for their friend. The girl said it was amazing. It was a revelation to them that a blacksmith could fight. Hang admitted that he was simply watching Miss Bluff's movements. Cruel noted that it was still amazing. In the end, she didn't even have time to see the blow. The elf admitted that she noticed the attack only after changing her stance. The hero was a little embarrassed. The warrior also noted that Master Hang is almost an A-rank swordsman. The man was very surprised. He couldn't believe he was almost an A-rank. The dragon said that she knew it too. Cruel stated that Hang was actually very strong, as she would not let a normal person near a holy dragon. The elf was hooked by the words about the holy dragon. The girl analyzed that ordinary people are struck by the high energy of dragons and cannot approach them. However, Hang and Cruel's situation reveals new facts. Bluff said that the blacksmith was able to get close because he was a person with great potential. The man couldn't believe that he had any potential. The elf said that Hangy was currently hiding his potential. She suggested that he try to believe in himself more. The blacksmith wondered how one could believe in oneself. He thought of himself as a simple office worker from Japan who came into this world and became a decorative hero. He always believed that his strength was insignificant. The girls assured him that this was not so. The elf waited for an answer from the hero. The man said he would try to believe in himself more. The warrior commented that it was a good answer. She added that after all, Hang was able to forge such a good sword. The girl suggested giving the sword a special name. The blacksmith already had some idea. They pointed to the sky. The sword was given the name Skyward Aiming. The hero explained that he named it in honor of the possibilities, which are endless, just like the sky. Elphika liked the name. She thought it suited her weapon. The man added that this name suited the warrior herself better. The girl was struck by his words. Hang said that Bluff's blue eyes reminded him of the sky. The elf was embarrassed. The girl confessed sadly that she couldn't do it anymore. The hero asked what was wrong. Bluff hugged the shocked hero, declaring what a great guy he was. The man did not understand what the girl was doing. The elf said that Hang was her favorite. He didn't understand her. The girl said that the blacksmith is very cool and kind. He creates amazing swords, and he is also strong. The elf said that she had been looking for such a person for a long time. Bluff asked Hang if he would be with her. Cruel said no and grabbed the blacksmith. The girl said that he was her master. The hero felt very awkward. The elf replied that she was his master. The energy between the rivals was heating up. Sue screamed that this was all unfair, and she wanted it too. The girls started to squabble. The merchant saw in this whole spectacle a stunning dispute. The hero didn't understand what was going on at all. He was very confused by this whole situation. Bluff said that she would take the hero and take good care of him. She left the forge for a while with the merchant. The boys said goodbye to the warrior, but Cruel was very angry with her. Hang noticed that the elf turned out to be quite good. The wolf cub and the dragon seriously asked him if he really liked women like that. The man sheepishly denied it. He slowly began to walk away from them. The girls tried to stop him. The newly summoned hero sat alone with tea and waited for her teacher. It turned out to be Belf. The elf apologized for making the girl wait. The heroine commented that teacher Belfaville was late. The elf replied that she had already asked her to simply call her Belf more than once. The girl replied that such a formulation is common politeness, because a teacher is a teacher. The warrior lamented why the man was so stubborn. The elf noted that it was somehow easier with the heroine's compatriot. The girl did not understand her. The teacher didn't explain and asked not to pay attention. The heroine noticed that the elf had a new sword. Belf confirmed Endo's words, replying that she had found a great option. The girl apologized that the elf had to change weapons. The heroine said that it was her fault. The warrior objected, because they were both to blame. Endo noticed that the swordswoman was in a good mood today. She asked what happened. The elf replied that she had simply met a curious man. The heroine immediately guessed that if the teacher found the man curious, it meant they were having a duel. And from the elf's satisfied face, the girl could immediately see confirmation of her words. Endo commented sadly that once Bluff saw potential in a person, he couldn't resist them. The elf replied that it just made her feel better, and that it was nothing to worry about. Bluff noticed that the man was not as strong as she, Endo. The teacher announced that it was time for night training. The heroine did not immediately understand the elf. The stars were already shining in the night sky. Cruel announced to Hang that she had found a strange tree. Sue and the blacksmith had to take a break from their work. The wolf cub thought the plant was funny. The dragon said she had never seen such a tree before. The hero recognized the plant. It was bamboo. Hang explained that bamboo usually grows in his world. The man remembered that summoning a hero is an ancient magical technique. The blacksmith wanted to understand how bamboo came to this world. Was it thanks to the ancient heroes? Hang didn't expect to see him here at all. The hero wanted to make a fishing rod out of bamboo and go fishing. The girls knew nothing about fishing or a fishing rod. The man explained that you need to wind the line on the rod and you can fish. He suggested that his friends try it. The girls didn't understand anything, but they wanted to try. The boys came out to the river. Sue was wearing summer clothes that the vendor had given her. The girls were happy to be going fishing. The hero made fishing rods on the shore. He showed what the trick was with the line and hook. They put on worms, and now they could catch a lot of fish. Sue wanted to eat fish very much. The boys cast their fishing rods and watched the float. They stood there for quite a long time, and Cruel began to yawn. Sue complained that she couldn't catch anything. The dragon said that nothing was working because of him. The man asked who she was talking about. They pointed out to him a black spot in the water that was driving all the fish away from their place. Cruel got angry and took out her bow. She shot an arrow into the water. At that place, an explosion occurred in the water. A column of water rose high. The boys didn't understand what was happening. The dragon was angry, and the river itself seemed to be indignant. The hero noticed that the blob dodged the blow. Sue noted that the creature was large and fast. It disturbed the river. As a sign of indignation, the creature splashed the boys with water. Cruel was very angry. She threatened to transform into a dragon. Hang tried to calm her down. He realized something. The hero assumed that the black spot was the owner of the river, and although he had never seen a fishing rod, he still understood that it was a trap. The man asked the girl not to worry about it, but Cruel was already very angry. She said that she wanted to catch him. She asked to make her a fishing rod that would be able to catch the owner of the river. The boys returned to the forge. The dragon asked how Hang was doing with the new duck. The hero admitted that it is difficult to make such a fishing rod without a rigid material. Cruel was upset that they didn't have soft steel or anything like that. The man agreed with her. Suddenly he remembered something. Hang knew that when he worked in the forge, he was trying his best to make a good product. This was the case with the sword he made for Bluff. Thanks to his efforts, the finished sword became S rank. The hero became curious about what would happen if he wanted to make soft iron. To find out, you had to at least try. The man asked the dragon for an idea. The girl was interested in what Hang had already come up with. The guys got to work. The hero realized that his forge was definitely magical. He tried to remember what he had been told in the lessons he had received at the royal court. He remembered the words of the teacher who asked what was the most important thing in magic. Hang then replied that the main thing in magic is talent and knowledge. They agreed with his words. However, the magician wanted to draw attention to something more important. In magic, the most important thing is the embodiment of the image. The blacksmith forged metal and said to himself that soft iron would be embodied. The material was ready. Hang swung the new fishing rod to test its strength. He swung it vigorously in all directions. The girls were impressed. Cruel noted that the finished material was as light as bamboo. Sue was impressed by the way the stick dangled. The blacksmith said that the new fishing rod was almost ready. All that was needed was to tie the line on it. Cruel has transformed into a sacred dragon. She suggested using her dragon hair for the fishing line. The man noted that this was not a bad idea. The hero was told that he could now go fishing again. Hang agreed that it was time for revenge. The boys returned to the river. They noticed the master of the river. A large spot accompanied the fish. The friends could see a big fish in the water. Hang reminded the girls to use bait. He cast his fishing rod into the river. The hero was unwinding the fishing line. There was some movement in the water. Cruel noted that the bait was working. Sue was delighted. The spot approached Hang's fishing rod. The bait worked. The creature rushed onto the hook with worms. Hang spots the right moment to act. The hero tries to stay in place. The girls hug the old man to hold him back. Sue also turns to Druid for help. She asks to cook something tasty as a thank you for her help. The hero notices the liana with surprise. The man calls on everyone to pull her together. The heroes are pulling hard at something, possibly a fish. Hang continues to pull hard and catches a huge fish. He checks the girl's condition, making sure everything is okay. The girls confirm that they were not harmed. Cruel points at something, attracting the attention of the other characters. Sue exclaims with joy at the sight of the large creature. The girls are happy that Hang caught the creature. The hero confirms that they successfully completed the task together. The man expresses satisfaction, stating that everything is ready. The girls look pleased. The hero shows off the royal fried fish he cooked at Cruel's request. Sue notes that it is perfectly cooked, and Cruel admires its appearance. The girls happily eat the fish and thank Hang for the delicious food. Hang smiles, saying that they all caught this fish together. He remarks how his perfect life in another world has become extraordinary. The girl enjoys the food, closing her eyes in pleasure. The hero warns her against running so that she doesn't fall. The girl, surprised, declares that she is fine. Sue fell. Hang asks her where it hurts. The girl replies that it hurts nowhere, but she notices something. Sue points to the mushrooms, and the hero notices them, admiring the girl's observation. The hero explains that one of the mushrooms looks like an egg yolk and is called eggshell, and the other black mushroom resembles a poisonous species. The girl expresses a lack of understanding of what is happening. Hang, assuming that the white wolf tribe with a good sense of smell should know about such things, Cruella happily announces that she also found mushrooms. She is surprised by the size of the mushroom, calling it huge. Another girl asks if it is a monster. Hang is being distracted by someone. The hero is surprised to notice that there are ash hounds standing in front of them. Sue greets her parents happily. Hang asks why the girl's parents are here. They reply that they have come to help because the white wolf tribe has suffered due to the activity of the ash hounds. They specify that these creatures are more unpleasant than powerful. She also states that she would defeat the ash hounds if she could fight like a dragon. The girl adds that the spirits of the forest may be angry if she sets the trees on fire. The father reports that their current leader is particularly cunning, and the mother adds that he attacked one of them at night, seriously wounding him. The hero wonders if this is the same leader they saw earlier. Sue also says that they take food and money from their stores. The man notes that these creatures are fast and organized, with sharp claws and fangs. The girl expresses a desire to help them, feeling obligated to these people. Hang suggests making armor. Yagal asks in surprise if this is really true. The hero explains that they also live in the forest, and is ready to help if he can be useful in some way. The group expresses gratitude for the offer of assistance. Yagal notes that iron armor is too heavy for their purposes. He points out that they don't want to lose mobility, which is one of the strengths of the White Wolf tribe. The hero says that he was recently dismantling the forge and came across something. Hang calls them cubes. He explains that they are tools for plasticizing metal rods. The man wonders if Yagal was thinking about something else while the hero asks him to wait. The hero demonstrates the process of securing the part. Cruel is offered to pull. Hang explains that you need to pass a steel rod through a die with thinner holes to change its thickness. Yagal notices that the result is like a thread. The hero explains that drawing out metal is called the drawing process. The man says they will need their help further. The hero shows how to wrap an iron wire around a metal rod and then cut it to form a loop. Sue proudly states that she has made many rings. The hero notes that she is good at it. The girl asks if she is having fun. Sue confirms that she is indeed having fun. She adds that if she works hard, she will be able to help her mom and dad. She is adamant that she will try her best not to cause trouble in the future. Hang strokes her head. The hero announces that everything is ready. The girl asks in surprise what this object is, having never seen anything like it before. Yagal notes that the chain skin is lightweight and allows for much more freedom of movement than heavy armor. This should ensure mobility and protection for the White Wolf tribe. Yagal is determined to try to do something. Sue says her father failed to make the armor, but is glad it survived the test. He emphasizes that he put a lot of effort into the work. The hero warns them not to rush into joy and reminds them that they still need to make efforts to protect the entire tribe. The group of characters unites, expressing their willingness to continue working together. The girls are actively working on creating armor. The group of characters happily agrees, stating that they now all have the things they need. They apologize for all the inconvenience, turning to Master Hang. The hero reminds them that the forest's problems and his own problems are connected. The hero offers to join them, pointing out that he is also dealing with the same problems. Cruel is determined to go with them, as she is a guardian dragon and must help the forest. Other characters also express a desire to join. The hero warns her that it is dangerous and asks her to remain quiet. The girl declares that she is also from the tribe and wants to fight equally with everyone. Yeagle asks if she is willing to risk her life. Sue insists on her desire to help. He turns to Master Hang. The hero suggests that he and Cruel protect the girl, and the rest can act according to their own tactics. Sue joins the group. The group of characters notice that they have become a perfect pack and unite as one to fight the ash hounds of the forest. The hero tells the warriors of the wolf tribe city to be strong. Yeagle decisively declares war on the ash hounds, raising his sword and receiving support from the rest of the participants. A group of characters stand together, preparing for action. Yeagle notices the scent of the ash hound and points in the direction it is located. Hang asks, where exactly? He clarifies that he sees only one hound, but the hero assures that there are two of them. Yeagle confirms that they are indeed ash hounds. Hang explains that he uses a telescope to observe objects at a distance. The man notes that he has a good nose and ears, but his eyesight is not so sharp. He says that is why using a telescope is surprising to them. Yeagle notices that the scent has become stronger and guesses that the flock consists of 10 or 8 individuals. The hero asks how far they are from the target. Hang estimates the distance to the target, stating it is about 400 meters or less than 450 steps. He wonders if this is the main pack. The pack is initially divided into several groups, which then branch out into many smaller groups. The hero explains that the leader leads the entire pack, and the other individuals manage their squads. It looks like an army, which means the pack the heroes are hunting must be larger. Yeagle asks in surprise what the smell is. He speculates that they are a tribe of white wolves and expresses concern that they may be connected to the disappearance of one of their members. Yeagle says that they must go to the rescue immediately. The hero turns to Mr. Yeagle, urging him to wait. The hero tells Sue to follow him, and she agrees. Hang notices that the other character's physical strength allows them to move very quickly, and he can barely keep up with them. He is surprised by the presence of other white wolves in this place, considering it unusual. A group of heroes are surrounded by many evil wolves on the field. The gold that was stolen by the ash hounds. Yeagle notices that the situation is a trap. The wolves begin their attack by jumping on the heroes with fury. Hang warns of Yeagle's attack. Hang protects Sue by covering her with his body while the other heroes try to help. The heroes discuss how they managed to fight off the wolf attack thanks to their excellent armor. Yeagle says they used the gold and furs they captured. Hang notes that the enemy was more cunning than expected. The boy objects, saying that ash hounds cannot be so smart and far-sighted. The heroes admit that although their opponents were smart, they themselves were not defenseless and were able to cope with the situation. Several days pass. A group of heroes rushes to attack their enemies. The young man actively uses his sword to attack. The enemy smirks, causing Hang to be surprised and wonder what could be the reason for such confidence. Hang informs his ally that Cruel's signal has been activated. A group of heroes runs towards the goal. Hang notices that they are being pursued by enemies, and Yeagle agrees. The hound almost manages to bite the cloak. The heroes successfully trap the enemies, causing them to get caught, and one of them orders the others to run to avoid danger. Sue asks why the wolves were chasing them. She calls the wolves to catch up with her. The wolves attack the heroine and try to catch up with her. Sue finds herself in a dangerous situation when one of the wolves jumps on her, but someone saves her. Cruel actively uses his abilities and shoots at the hound. The heroine praises Sue for her good work. Hang notes that Sue has attracted the attention of all the ash hounds, and Cruel has also done a great job. The group of heroes gathers together, surrounded by many wolves, preparing for the next stage. Hang expresses determination and says that it is now their turn to act. The heroes discuss a plan in which bait will be used to gather the ash hounds in one place and then attack them. Sue supports the idea and offers herself as bait, declaring her willingness to carry out the task. But Yeagle does not agree. She also expresses a desire to become bait. Hang tries to dissuade her, as it is dangerous. Sue tries to persuade them and tells the hero that what is needed as bait is someone who is not particularly strong. The girl declares that she is also from the tribe of white wolves and considers herself a warrior. Hang notices that the girl is serious, but agrees with her decision. She expresses gratitude to the man for his support. Cruel will protect the girl. She agrees with this decision. The girl's parents express pride in her, emphasizing their confidence that she is worthy of trust and participation in the mission. The mother expresses trust and confidence in her daughter by telling her that she is counting on her. Hang notices a large wolf approaching and exclaims, recognizing him as the leader of the pack. Eagle firmly declares that he will now deal with the leader. Sue screams at her father, who falls backwards into a tree from the leader's blow. The group of heroes are surprised when they see the leader deflect an arrow. The heroes think that this leader is a mutant. Hange asks Cruel what's wrong. Cruel explains that sometimes creatures are born abnormally strong. She decides to take the form of a dragon but is stopped. The girl with white hair supports the hero and thinks why he cannot believe in his own strength. Hange firmly declares that he can handle it himself. The hero feels threatened by the enemy, feeling goosebumps on his spine and realizing the enemy's intention to kill him. The enemy jumps on the hero with fury. The man expresses self-confidence. When the leader jumps on Hang, the man takes out his sword and stabs the enemy. He deals a strong blow to the opponent. The group of heroes, consisting of girls, express surprise and admiration at Hang's actions. The hero defeated the leader, and the heroes rejoice. Sue suggests capturing the remaining ash hounds, but Yigal objects, believing it unnecessary. He notes that the ash hounds will no longer attack after losing their leader. The girls attack Hang. They tell him he was cool. He thanks both girls. In the city, the leader's head was made into a trophy. The heroes raise their glasses in celebration of their victory over the ash hounds and celebrate their bravery, asking to drink to the bottom. Hang looks at the plate with the drink and drinks all the liquid. The heroes are relaxing and having fun. This celebration lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The heroes and the pack stand opposite each other to say goodbye. The group of heroes thanks Master Hang for his help. Yigal says that without Hang's help, they would still be afraid of the threat of the ash hounds, and their packs would be fighting each other. Hang again. The hero mounts his horse, but notices that someone is insulting him again, calling him a decorative element, causing him irritation. The man addresses everyone, thanking them for their participation and support. The heroes communicate in a friendly manner, inviting each other to meet again and have a drink together. Yigal happily responds, agreeing to the proposal. He invites Sue to come back to them. Yigal states that she is now considered a warrior, taking on the dangerous role of bait for the group. The heroine addresses her parents and the pack. She is willing to learn from Hang and emphasizes the importance of helping the entire family. Sue expresses a desire to be with Cruella and Hang. In the end, the group happily agrees. Yigal apologizes to Hang for disturbing him. The man replies that everything is fine and asks if he minds it. Yigal says that the path Sue has chosen is her own decision, and the group trusts her completely. The group thanks Master Hang for his help and support, bidding him farewell with kind words. The king expresses disappointment, asking the man in front of him why he was defeated again. He explains that the hero's unique skill, Wind Guardian, is an incredible power that cannot be compared to the capabilities of heroes of the past. The hero continues to wonder about the reasons for the defeat. The girl says that the soldiers are not to blame and takes full responsibility for the defeat. She asks to stop blaming the soldiers, emphasizing their innocence and willingness to take all the consequences upon themselves. The king asks if Kana has anything else to say after her defeat, and she replies that she doesn't want to seem arrogant. But she has a request. The girl with white hair expresses surprise and begins to think about where the needed thing could be. Cruel finds what she was looking for. The group of heroes discovers honey, which is very sweet, much to Cruel's delight. Hang spots an insect that looks like a Hercules beetle and says it's from his home world. Sue decides to catch it. The young man warns the heroine that it is not safe to go too deep into the forest, but she continues to move forward with confidence. Suddenly, a huge bear appears and shows aggression, indicating that he is protecting his honey. The bear attacks Hang. The girl hits the bear with magic. Lady Kanai appears and saves Hang from a bear attack, demonstrating her strength and skill. The heroes chat over tea, where the girl is surprised to learn that she is drinking barley tea for the first time since arriving in this world. Hang says that cold barley tea is ideal for summer. The girls notice that their master knows this woman. Kanai asks the man who the girls are. The girls help with the forge and are his neighbors. The girl understands where he works now. Hang expresses pleasure in blacksmithing, thanking the king and ministers for the opportunity. Kana admits that the hero's new life has just begun. Hang says that what brought her here is that she probably has a lot of worries. The girl asks him to teach her how to forge swords. The man notices that the girl is hiding something and considers her request insincere, deciding to find out the truth. Hang hopes to find out the truth about her. To help Kana get used to the environment, Master Hang asks Cruel to teach her the basics of blacksmithing. Cruel and the girl begin working together in the forge. Their work begins with awkwardness, but after a few days they become friends. The heroines discuss flavor combinations for making onigiri, where Hang remarks that rice and strawberries do not go well together, causing surprise among the others. A few days later, Kana finishes working on the sword, declaring it ready. When Master Hang asks if she is sure she did everything correctly, Cruel confirms that although she helped, it was indeed Master Kana's work. The hero is surprised why a rapier was chosen for the sword. Kana replies that it is strange, but that is the image that came to her mind. He notes that the result is not bad for a forging enthusiast, although there are some doubts. The hero invites Kana to compare strength with him. He wants to fight her. Kana expresses surprise and does not understand what is being said. She doesn't understand because this is a duel with a master. Kana admits that she doesn't like this kind of thing. Hang explains that it's a kind of test for the weapon. The hero points out that even though the sword was made by Kana, it has his name engraved on it, so he can't just give it away. He offers to make a bet and says that if he loses, he will make her a gold sheath or something. She asks what will happen if he wins. The hero expresses a desire to learn the truth from the girl, which she had been hiding all this time. Suddenly, the man attacks the girl. The hero notices that she talks more than she acts. The heroine firmly declares that this is not the hero's business and tries to push him away. Suddenly, she attacks the hero, smashing her sword against his. Henge notes that the rapier she made is good but still too crude. He explains that if she had forged the sword with all her heart, it would not have broken so easily. The hero asks Kanai where she is rushing to. The girl asks the hero for something. Kanai cries and asks Master Hang for help, talking about her mentor, Belphivia. The king states that they are against saving Belphivia. Kanai asks him why. The man explains that although Belphivia is a famous swordsman known as the Purple Thunder, she saved many soldiers' lives in this war. The king replies that although she is a good warrior, she does not have the special skills of heroes. The girl says that the country has already lost many soldiers in the last battle and now has no resources, so she offers to take on the task of saving Belphivia. The senior military commander warns that sending heroes could leave the front lines undefended, opening the country to demonic attack. He expresses doubt about sending a rescue team, fearing further losses. The king announces that he is giving Kanai a vacation. He explains that they can't let the hero go into battle alone. Rest will help her cool down and think about the situation. The man wishes her a good rest. Explaining why she hid the truth from the beginning, she admits that she did not want to ruin the hero's new life. Kanai notes that she had been watching the heroes having fun and thought it would be selfish of her to join in. However, she sees them fighting a bear and decides to help, even though she feels scared. The hero convinces the girl that they have already come too far to retreat. Hang admits that Miss Belf is the first person to recognize him as a warrior, and therefore he cannot do otherwise. The hero and the girl notice a creepy forest ahead, which is controlled by demons. They discuss the difficult situation, including a major battle that took place there 2 weeks ago, as there is mithril ore there. The hero notes that the war was started because of this ore, and even with the help of Kanai and Belf, the current battle was lost. Hang asks the girl what happened to her weapons. Kanai says that all her weapons were taken away when she was given leave. The hero notices that the girl's skirt was made by Cruel and looks beautiful. The man offers the girl his katana, but she asks if he is sure about his decision. Hang replies that she has more experience. The hero states that he has a secret weapon, causing the girl to be surprised, and they decide to hurry, as he is worried about Miss Belf. Cruel expresses hope that Hang will be okay. The girl insists on wanting to go with him, but Hang replies that it is better for her to stay home. Hang explains that it is because of her power that he wants her to stay safe. Sue supports their conversation, insisting that everything will be fine. The girl agrees with Hang's decision, emphasizing her confidence in his return. Kanai orders the hero to lie down. Suddenly 2 demons appear, one of which is holding a torch. Kanai says that demons have very good hearing and warns them to be careful. Hang tells the girl that she is close to him. Kanai quietly warns him not to make noise. The girl wonders what an army of demons is doing in such a place. The hero wonders if they are looking for Belf, but denies it. Kana sees the kimono of a girl sitting in a carrier. One of the demons states that the woman is destined for the Lord and she should be happy, because she could have died somewhere in the field. The girl is trying to say something. The same girl who is sitting in the carrier appears. The hero recognizes Miss Belf level for a Brigadier. The demons heard them and ask who is there. Kana tensely says that they have been noticed. The heroes decide to flee to avoid detection. Heiji reassures her that if they are caught, rescue will be impossible. The girl says that they are about to fly away and orders the hero to shut his mouth. Suddenly the heroes experience shock and fear as they take off. Heiji expresses his amazement upon seeing Kana's unique skill, Wind Guardian, which he observes for the first time. She thanks Master Heiji for his help, stating that she would not have been able to reach her destination without him. Master Heiji replies that they are now even, but he says that in the future she should warn in advance. Kana says that why was their teacher in such a dangerous place? One of them notes that demons really do eat people, although this was only heard in legends. Heiji thinks that the teachers might be sacrificed. Kana says that they should go there immediately. The man learns that their goal is right on their path. A group of heroes rushes to their destination, passing through demons in various buildings. They are standing by the corridor. Miss Belf is sitting in another room. Suddenly they notice a group of demons having a feast. Belf wonders why everything worked out so well, Heiji says. It's a good question. Heiji and Kana stand in front of the teacher. The woman asks why the master is here. Heiji states that they came to save her. Belf reminds them that they are in demon territory. Kana also says that she can only rely on a very limited number of people and asks not to leave her student alone. Belf expresses a desire for her student to become independent as soon as possible. She thanks the man for saving her. Heiji says that he feels the same way as Kana and admits that he still has much to learn from her. He stresses the importance of retreating quickly before they become victims. Belf doesn't understand what victims are being talked about. The stranger now understands where the smell of people comes from. The demon asks the heroes what their intentions were in breaking into his mansion without an invitation.